Okay. So then it was. Oh, we'll come back here for a second. So then it was the defense. So after all that, prosecution rested. Defense came up. Okay, so they brought up. I think it was a paralegal or something, and he had some phone call records. It was kind of unimportant shit. And then they brought up their only witness, big key witness, which was a guy named Costello. And Costello is kind of an asshole, and he was sort of advising Cohen when Cohen was being investigated by the FBI. And then Cohen said, I don't trust this guy, because he used to work for Rudy Giuliani, who was Trump's lawyer at the time. And he was a big Trump supporter. And so Cohen's like, I don't trust him. Because I think if I tell him anything, he's going to go to Giuliani. Giuliani's going to go to Trump. And then I'm going to be in deep shit. So Cohen didn't hire him. And that's when Cohen ended up testifying with the FBI to try and reduce his sentence. He still did whatever, 2 years. But that's what happened, right? So that was what was going on. But this guy was going to testify that, no, Michael Cohen told me that he did this all by himself and Trump had no idea. Trump was totally unaware that Cohen was doing all this. So that's what Costello was going to do. And we'll get into this. So this is Fox, and they're going to talk about the Costello thing.
Michael Cohen's former legal advisor says that he is ready to take the stand at former President Trump's trial and that he can contradict Michael Cohen's testimony. Bob Costello says the prosecution's star witness told him years ago that he had nothing on former President Trump. That conversation came up during Cohen's testimony. Prosecutor Susan Hoffringer asking Cohen, quote, during that meeting, did you tell Mr. Costello the truth about what Mr. Trump's role was in the payoff to Stormy Daniels? Cohen testified on the stand under oath, no. Hoffringer, why not? Cohen, first, I wasn't sure that I was going to hire him. There was something really sketchy and wrong about him. He came with a retainer agreement, and I said, I'm not going to pay that right now. I'm still speaking to other lawyers. So I certainly wasn't going to expose anything to one, someone I didn't know, and two, I was having trouble connecting with. Bob Costello joins me now. Bob, welcome back to the program. Good to see you. So that's your word against his on the stand the other day. What do you say to the fact that he says that he was not being truthful with you in that conversation?
Well, first of all, it's not my word against his. I was there with my law partner. Mm-hmm. Second of all, virtually everything that Michael Cohen has said, and I read his testimony, at least the part that relates to me, is a lie. And I have documents to prove it. He claims that right there in the clip that you just put on the screen that we brought a retainer agreement. Totally untrue. He didn't see a...
Okay, so that's Costello. That's the guy who's going to totally rebut Cohen and tell you that Cohen's a liar. Here's what happened with Costello's testimony. And you want to talk about weird shit happening in court. Here it is. So Costello, let's go into this. Here's Lawrence O'Donnell. Lawrence O'Donnell's going to give you sort of a taste of how the testimony went. And then we're going to go into, I think, Chris Hayes, and Chris Hayes is going to tell you what actually the substance was. But I wanted to give you a taste of what happened here. Check this out.
Clear the courtroom! Exclamation point. Now, you can spend your life working in courtrooms and never hear those words. Clear the courtroom. And if you have spent time in Judge Juan Merchan's courtroom, it would feel all the more impossible that you are hearing the words clear the courtroom and that you were hearing those words said repeatedly and loudly and most shockingly of all, angrily by Judge Juan Merchan, as we did today at 4:01 p.m. And as I was walking out of the courtroom, I asked a retired New York City judge who was in the audience today how many times he had to clear the courtroom when he was a judge. His answer was what I expected. Never. In a multi-week trial, a courtroom becomes a community. Everyone gets to know.
So he's going into the log. So what happened was Costello kept interrupting the objections while the judge was sustaining him and rolling his eyes and sighing and saying, geez, and getting upset. And the judge said, hey, you don't do that, right? Knock it off. And then he said something about, I can't remember what he said, like, he said something and the judge was like, what did you just say? What did you just say to me? And he just said, strike that. And the judge said, no, you don't strike things in my court. Only I strike things in my court. Making strike it from the record, right? And then the guy tried to stare Bouchon down. Bouchon said, you tried to stare me down? And then Bouchon yelled, clear the courtroom. Everybody out. And then Costello tried to get up. He's like, not you. Sit down. And they cleared the jury out of the courtroom. And they cleared the press and everybody out of the courtroom. And it was just the attorneys and he basically had a discussion. They released the transcripts later where he basically told them, this is what decorum is going to look like in my courtroom. This is how you're going to behave. You're not going to say geez to me. You're not going to try and eyeball me. You're not going to fucking, make comments during objections.
You're not going to sit and suck your teeth at me in the courtroom.
But he did that when he yelled at him and yelled clear the courtroom before he lectured him. He did that. The jury saw that. So the jury was already like, oh, fuck. But, so this whole thing, so this was like the big news everybody was talking about. And it was interesting. It's good. It's juicy. Don't get me wrong. I like it. It's juicy stuff. But it's not really the substance, and it's not really what's important here. What's important here is, and we're going to this. What's important here is what happened. What was the actual substance? Was he said, look, Cohen lied. Cohen did it all on his own. Right? So now you have Costello's word against Cohen's word. That's really what we have going on. Well, they did the cross-examination, and the prosecutor got up and questioned Costello, and they pulled out all of his old emails about this because they got warrants. And it did not go well. So here's Chris Hayes to talk a little bit about the emails and what happened in the cross.
Good evening from New York. I'm Chris Hayes. Well, after 5 weeks, the first criminal trial of a former U.S. president is nearly over. The defense rested this morning. It called only 2 witnesses. And despite all his bravado and insistences to the contrary, Donald Trump was not one of them. I mean, we knew that, right? Instead, we heard briefly from a paralegal at attorney Todd Blanche's firm about phone records before a man by the name of Robert Costello took the stand. Now, Costello is a former federal prosecutor, a very close associate of Rudy Giuliani, the twice indicted former mayor of New York City. We'll have more about him later in the show. And also Donald Trump's personal attorney while he was in the White House, Giuliani, that is. I think it is fair to say that Costello's testimony this week backfired on the defense, though how much remains to be determined. But Trump's attorney's main reason to put that man, Robert Costello, on the stand was to directly contradict and impugn the credibility of the prosecution's key witness, Michael Cohen. But I gotta say, turns out Robert Costello might be the only person in the country who can make Michael Cohen seem even-tempered by comparison. Costello began his testimony yesterday acting like what can be best described as a petulant teenager, rolling his eyes, muttering under his breath, at one point saying that something would be to strike something. Of course, that's not his job, that's the judge. And then after sort of crossing the judge, tried to stare him down, at which point the judge was like, are you staring me down? Cleared the courtroom. After clearing the courtroom, the judge called Costello's conduct, quote, contemptuous.
So we'll skip some of that because I want to get into the more of what happened with the emails here, but we'll go ahead. So here it is, right here.
Was aligned with Rudy, who was aligned with Trump, so hire me, you'll stay in the circle. Now, Costello says he was just there to offer his legal services. So that's the sort of main battle here, right, over what happened. And today, prosecutor Susan Hoffinger asked Costello, quote, you discussed with Cohen at that very first meeting how connected you were to Rudy Giuliani, correct? And Costello responded, quote, that's not true. Hoffinger then read Costello an email Costello wrote to Cohen 2 days after that meeting, which stated, and we quote here, I am sure you saw the news that Rudy is joining the Trump legal team. I told you that my relationship with Rudy could be very, very useful to you. Again, Costello's words. The prosecutor also read an email he wrote to a legal partner the same day, not to Cohen, quote, All the more reason for Cohen to hire me because of my connection to Giuliani, which I mentioned to him in our meeting.
I want to put that mentioned to him in a meeting. So the question was, did you tell Michael Cohen that he should hire you because you're heavily connected with Rudy Giuliani? No, that's not true. Here are several emails you wrote at that time, which I mentioned to him in our meeting because of my connection to Giuliani. So were you lying to him then? You lying now? What's going on? And there's more of these. There was a bunch of emails that contradicted everything Costello said. Where Costello was trying to bully him and blackmail him. And Costello was doing it on behalf of Trump and Giuliani. So all of this is still being directed by Trump. So what Costello proved is at the end, it was all being directed by Trump. Which is what Cohen was there to establish. Costello just reinforced it. So putting Costello on the stand actually was more condemning because it reinforced everything Michael Cohen said. Because Costello got caught lying. And it was and it got caught that Costello was doing this directly in line with what Giuliani and Trump were telling him to do. So Trump was at the head of all of this. So
This is just all ridiculous.
no, I know. And this was the thing, is everybody was talking about why are they putting Costello on the stand? And it turned out Trump pressed his attorneys to do it. His attorneys didn't want it. Because they knew he'd be fucking a detriment. But Trump thought he'd be good, but they were like, nope. And sure enough, he ended up proving the prosecution's case. Because they were able to pull out his emails. He was actually their best witness.
That's so terrible. I mean, it's good for one side and bad for the other, but like terrible, like that the only, I mean, it's kind of pathetic, right? The only real witness that they've got, the only person who really has anything to say, kind of just helps out the other side mostly.
Yeah. It's basically, I mean, Cohen's been caught lying in the past, Costello's been caught lying in the past and stuff, so you got the two guys up there. And it's that old riddle where you have the two guards, and one of them always lies, and one of them always tells the truth, and you got to figure out what the door is, right? Well, in this case, we figured out which one lies and which one was telling the truth. Costello was full of shit, and they weren't able to catch Cohen in a lie at all. Cohen was honest about everything. Cohen admitted to stealing. He admitted to a crime on the stand. So, yeah.